This B Podcast Network show is presented by IXL. IXL's all-inclusive online teaching and learning platform simplifies edtech needs and accelerates achievement in 95 of the top 100 U.S. school districts. IXL delivers personalized learning across a comprehensive pre-K-12 curriculum, including math, language arts, science, and social studies, and it helps you assess student performance through actionable real-time insights at every level of your school or district. This one solution performs work that typically requires dozens of different tools. Want to find out why so many leading districts trust IXL? Visit ixl.com/BE. That's ixl.com/BE. Welcome in, everybody. You are listening to the Authority Podcast here on the B Podcast Network, and I am extra pleased to welcome you to this episode, which is part of our National Literacy Month campaign in partnership with Reading is Fundamental. We're doing these episodes across the B Podcast Network on many of our shows, focusing on reading, literacy, the current state of literacy and literacy education across the U.S., and many different variables related to that, and community involvement, family involvement, and more. So please do check out some of those episodes as well. But without further ado, let's get into today's conversation. And I have a great guest to talk about reading. It is Dr. Lorraine Radice. She is an educator, author, speaker, and professional developer. Currently, she's an assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction in a public school district in New York. Prior to that role, she was a pre-K-12 director of literacy, and she's also an associate assistant professor at Hofstra University. Her book is called Leading a Culture of Reading, and it was a 2023 Gold winner for education and the Foreword Indies Book of the Year Awards. We're excited to talk about it today. Lorraine, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ross. Thank you for having me.
Let's get into there's a lot of different things here, but I'd love to start by defining from your view what it means to be a literacy leader.
Sure. I think being a literacy leader is about rallying people to create communities around literacy within your school or within your school district. One of the things that I work really hard to do is to connect with all stakeholders in a school community: administrators, teachers, students, parents, caregivers, community members, and to create a vision around literacy and learning and invite those stakeholders to partner in sharing action plans to carry out that vision for students. In the Leading a Culture of Reading book, I start out by framing the vision around how I worked with teams to build literacy culture specifically around reading. And the values of that vision were that reading is important, engagement is important, joy is important, community is important, and everyone is important. And I think those 5 values really capture my approach to literacy leadership and how I support others to do similar work.
Yeah, and given, I guess, the relative importance of literacy and literacy skills, and we'll get into, I think, a little bit more about the current state of literacy proficiency and some of the challenges toward this path of creating this culture around reading, should be viewing themselves and defining what it means for them to be literacy leaders, like as far as all the people that work in schools, right? And is that happening commonly enough? You've been a director of literacy, now you're assistant superintendent of instruction, but as a school principal, assistant principal, teachers in different subject areas, right? Different people that are working in schools. Are we often enough defining ourselves as literacy leaders and thinking about what that really means and how that's important to everything we do? Or is it being frequently confined to only certain people?
I think all adults in a school community have the capacity to be a literacy leader, and that manifests differently depending upon your role, depending upon what grade level you work in an organization. So if the vision is that all are literacy leaders for kids, then the next step is to really look at, and I appreciate this question, what your individual role is as an adult for students in supporting their reading lives. So we know that we have teachers earlier on in a child's journey teaching them how to read, right? And how to make meaning from reading. And that continues and manifests differently as kids get older. And then we have content area teachers at the secondary level that absolutely have extreme positive influence on kids' reading lives in content area disciplines. And that might look a little different in each content area class. Sometimes there is the thought that reading may only happen within a literacy block or an English class in high school or a reading class in middle school. And it certainly does, but part of creating a vision around the importance of reading is to identify how we support kids as readers in each of the different contexts that they participate in. One of the things that I encourage new teachers to think about when I host workshops at, let's say, a new teacher orientation in a school district is to really find their place in a child's reading life. You never know, a math teacher can start class, 2 minutes just doing a book talk about what the teacher is reading. Say, hey, I read this great article. I read this great book. Could be a sports fan and they read sports news every Monday and Tuesday. You never know if a child makes a connection to that teacher. You never know how that teacher can make a positive influence on that student as a reader, even if reading may not be what is obviously done in the class.
In my work, I've collaborated directly with hundreds of educators to support their success. Do you know which of their EdTech frustrations comes up time and again? The sheer number of tools out there and the difficulty of knowing which ones schools like theirs are using to get results. iExcel is different. Not only does it perform the functions of dozens of tools, it's currently delivering results for 1 in 4 U.S. students, including those in 95 of the top 100 districts. Another major pain point that comes up when a school is excited to implement a new tool only to find out the teachers hate it. Yikes. It helps to know that iExcel is loved and trusted by more than 1 million teachers, saving them time on prep work while enabling them to better support student learning. iExcel is research proven to accelerate achievement. Studies across 45 states show that iExcel schools outperform non-iExcel schools on state assessments. And independent research from Johns Hopkins University verifies that iExcel meets ESSA Tier 1 standards. With those results combined with iExcel's teacher-friendly reputation, what more could you ask for? If you have a goal to increase achievement for all students, make sure to find out what iExcel can do for you. Visit iexcel.com/BE for a demo. That's iexcel.com/BE. Yeah. And so I introduced in the intro, the book is called Leading a Culture of Reading, and the extended title includes How to Ignite and Sustain a Love of Literacy. And I want to use that as the framing for talking about what's the current state of ignition, right? What's happening in schools? What is the status quo regarding students' love of reading, desire to become readers and improve these skills? And what's the starting point that we're typically looking at when we're looking to create a stronger culture around literacy?
Well, I think that depends. Every school district it's a different context and it manifests differently. And that's why the work that does happen in the school is super important to how the community responds to supporting students. So if adults in a school community can rally together to really solidify the importance of reading, and reading looks and feels differently for all kids and all adults. But if the adults can rally around and solidify how important reading is for kids and build that culture within the school community as a building, as a district, and as I said, to invite community members into the project and to invite family members and caregivers into this project, it starts to spread. It's almost like layers of an onion, and each layer has a responsibility, and each of those responsibilities signals to kids that reading is important. And part of the messaging, like I said, is that reading looks and feels differently for everyone. So it's about supporting kids to find their niche in terms of being a reader.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there along the, I guess, of reading skill development, like certain critical points to really focus on and reinforce, especially with respect to the desire and the engagement? We can think about, okay, like very young kids, when first being introduced to the idea of reading, there's, I think, an intrinsic interest in that. But along the way, there's typical factors that I think contribute to unengagement or disengagement among students, having to do with struggling or feeling like they're not being supported in that, et cetera. But are there like typical points when you're looking at, okay, how are we getting everybody up to being able to read the way that they can be able to really focus on fortifying that engagement or maintaining that engagement? Like that's common, of course. Again, it's different student by student, but I'm sure there's different developmental points where it's like, let's really pay attention to this.
Sure. Every stage is crucial because as kids develop, we might instruct differently, right? Engagement looks different, curriculum looks different. So when kids are entering preschool, kindergarten, first grade, we're working on building early literacy skills and language skills, phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, vocabulary development, decoding, fluency, comprehension. And we build those early literacy skills. Some students work on early literacy skills for a longer period of time. And as kids learn how to read, we also incorporate strategies for meaning making and comprehension. A lot of time that's through read aloud. We build vocabulary, academic discourse through read aloud. And as we engage in those instructional practices to build those foundational skills, the backdrop, as you said, is to invite kids to think about themselves as readers, keep them engaged, present books or materials of interest. That's why it's so important for teachers to be aware of what students that they teach, what kids at that age level are interested in, to read books that are published for kids of that age, because as we're teaching kids those foundational skills and building their academic discourse and their vocabulary, we want to present them with high quality, high interest material so that they develop their skills and then also develop their interests and find their identity as a reader. And then as kids get older and they enter the middle and the high school years, we have things that go on in their lives that sometimes act as a distraction from reading. I've had many conversations with middle and high school teachers about technology, friendships, out of school commitments. Kids get very busy after school as they get older. And technology is one of the topics that we talk about a lot as being a distraction from things like reading, among other things in life sometimes. But one of the things that I've done a lot of thinking and work around is capitalizing on technology and using it as an entry point into reading engagement, especially for older readers. So one of the things that I talk about with teachers is something we often say is you read the book before you watch the movie, or you read the book before you watch the show. But with the rise in streaming platforms and more media being created after something has been published, movies, TV shows, sometimes kids watch something on Netflix or Amazon Prime, and then that causes them to want to read the book. Or if what they watch is part of a series or a trilogy, they watch maybe the first installment that's made, and while they're waiting for new episodes or new parts of the series to come out, they read the books in between. So that kind of old saying is, we're going to read it and then watch it, can sometimes now be flipped because the media engagement actually causes more of an engagement in reading. I saw that happen a lot with The Summer I Turned Pretty. That's a fairly new series that it was very rare for me to walk into a middle or high school classroom during independent reading and not see at least one or two students reading a book from that trilogy. So, and then there's also online communities that are dedicated toward reading. So Instagram has Bookstagram and TikTok has BookTok. So if kids are engaged in social media, we can carefully and thoughtfully as teachers integrate some of that into our conversation with older readers to showcase how adult readers on social media, or maybe older teenage readers, use social media as a way to network and connect around reading print or digital material, and that can invite them into a new space that is dedicated to reading. So it's about
Yeah.
finding creative ways to connect with kids, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, you were just talking about the social media piece, and it's a good area to discuss because there's a lot of research and discussion and text about the negative impacts that social media can have on kids and adults, right? And mental health and reality and engagement with the real world versus the online world, right? And a lot of that is very important to tune into and really think about brain development and social development. But also, you've referenced that there's ways to use social media to support reading engagement. How do those, I guess, like you mentioned a couple ideas, right? Instagram and TikTok and some of the ways that there are communities there. How does that, I guess, out of what the research says about the ways that social media affects students' lives and that we are trying to figure out ways to leverage the very real possibility of what's there and also the reality that these are technologies that kids are going to engage with. And so, as much as we try to figure out ways to manage that and make it healthy, that it's going to happen. And people, as they get older, are going to continue engaging with them, right? So, let's get some positive benefits out of it, but also understand what the research says about what the effects of them are broadly.
My research is more around usage because when I was and when I continue to build cultures of reading in school, I use social media and I use technology as a tool to help build the culture because the research behind the usage of technology is quite overwhelming to
Yeah,
look at
right.
the frequency of apps that are used and what apps are most popular, what media platforms are most popular. YouTube consistently is very popular among young teens, older teens, and adults. It's interesting to look at usage of social media among adults versus social media among teens. And using that information, we create intentional ways to build culture around reading in effort to connect with community members, families, teachers, kids. So for example, when I saw that YouTube was at the time the social media app that was highest in usage among younger and older teens, we used YouTube as a way to record read alouds for kids. We did some webinar style live read alouds, especially during the pandemic when activity using devices was quite frequent and quite common. So that's really what my research is mostly about in terms of social media and how it could be a tool to raise awareness about the importance of reading and as a tool of connectivity around reading within the community. Another example of that is in the first chapter of the book, I talk about the importance of branding reading. So almost like someone who works in an advertising company would do. You know, you make reading the brand of your school or your school district, and you use social media as a tool to spread the messaging around your brand. So we used at the time, it was Twitter, Instagram, looking at usage reports among adults and older teens. You know, people in the school community would post, and then as a district, we would use social media to raise awareness about reading events and the importance of reading and the work that was happening in school.
Are there ways, as far as right the process of branding reading, as far as creating excitement and celebration around reading and instilling students with a feeling of the importance of reading that, is beyond the point of developing reading skills, right? I mean, because there's value to reading versus we talked about devices and streaming and different ways of consuming content and stories and things like that, that follows people throughout their lives, right? Like once we are already proficient readers, we can read, we can comprehend, we can read in variety of contexts, we still have choices between, all right, do I want to read now or do I want to consume some other form of content or do something else? And so we've talked about it and I've asked about it in the context, of course, of literacy development and that part of it, which is critical, but it goes beyond that too. How can that be addressed through the branding of reading and what it's about, and getting students really excited and interested in continuing to be readers, in beyond strictly how they're learning how to read.
Can you be more specific of what you're asked? So just rephrase the question.
Yeah, I think another way of asking it is I'll ask it from me. I know how to read, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so why should I read instead of watching a movie?
I think it's personal preference, right? So people read for different reasons, and we address reading in school for different reasons. We've talked about skill development in our conversation and how we, of course, want to develop kids' reading skills alongside their engagement. And eventually, part of the work that we do in school is to show kids the magic of reading and how reading allows us to use our imagination. It opens the door to creativity. It gives people agency. For some students, reading gives them access to information that maybe they won't receive from adults or support networks at home. So the reasons for why reading is important beyond developing the skill of reading so that we can make meaning of what we encounter in life, I think varies for different people. And I think reading is something that changes as people change. So we might, as adults or young people, love reading for one period in our life, and then reading for pleasure, that is. And then we might put it down. We might start a show or go into movies, but then we might return to reading for pleasure. And that's something that's going to fluctuate. And I've had a lot of conversations with teachers about how that kind of mirrors what their reading lives are like. Life is busy. Sometimes we always don't have time to read, or we're too tired to read, right, with eye strain. And that's something to talk with kids about, is that we want to obviously have reading volume, because there is a positive relationship between reading volume and achievement for young kids in school. But as we develop habits around reading, we want to be aware of what causes us to maybe put the book or the Kindle down, or what might distract us from reading, and kind of build personal plans around having some commitment to it. Because as in addition to imagination and magic and pleasure that reading can bring, like I said, it also is an opportunity to learn. And it's important to continue to learn as adults, whether it's news or information of an area of interest. So it's different for everybody.
Yeah, one of the things that stands out about the way that you write about it and the approach to building this culture is that it's there's a thoughtfulness toward marketing the idea and the value of reading and of what reading can be. And it's something that can apply to, I think, a lot of areas of teaching and learning and to student engagement, right? And getting them involved, and something that's not traditionally necessarily a strength of schools or education in general. I've had conversations with experts in teacher development about the teacher shortage and attrition issue, and some of them communicated it's a marketing problem. We're not good at marketing this profession and what this is, and and so it doesn't make it appealing to people to get involved in it. And the same thing here, that it's about, okay, we want to appeal to the minds of students, to the minds of their families, to the minds of the teachers, about that this is something that should be aspirational, should be fun, should be enjoying. And even the language, right? We talked about branding, reading, right? And literacy campaigns as a mechanism for developing this culture, all consistent with the idea of that we're marketing it. What are literacy campaigns, the way you write about them?
So when I was hired for my position as a director of literacy, this was my charge. The vision of the superintendent was to build a culture that celebrates reading and that prioritizes reading. So we came up with a slogan, a hashtag, a saying that would be the mechanism for propelling the message around the importance of reading. So that was LB Reads. Long Beach is the district in which we started this work. So we did LB Reads, and very simple, to the point, shares what's important is that in Long Beach, we read and it's important. And when we launched that, we had a logo, an image designed that captured the essence of the community in which the school district was. And we had our school district logo with the LB Read saying on the bottom. And we used this image on all of our messaging to families and caregivers when we would have events. You would find it on our school website. You would find it on email signatures of employees. And what started to happen was that teachers would create bulletin boards, with what kids are currently reading, using that image and that slogan. So that became the brand. And one of the things that I write about is this idea of culture as an event. And that means that while as a team, you set a vision and some guidance for how you're going to take action in building the culture, it's also important to leave some space for people to find themselves in the culture. So whereas we set this LB Reads vision and we had the logo and some material that was given to teachers that they can use with kids to share about their reading lives, people started to create their own material using the LB Reads logo and saying, and they found their own personal ways to contribute to the culture building. So an example of that is, during the pandemic, when people were making virtual classrooms and digital bookshelves, you would find the little LB Reads logo even within the walls of a virtual classroom, in addition to the walls of the brick and mortar classroom in school. So that's an example of how that piece of advertising can really help to put air under the wings of the culture that you're trying to build.
Yeah. If someone else in a similar position to yourself was looking to do something similar in their district, are there a few how-tos that you would recommend for them to go with creating and launching a campaign?
Sure. So to think about something catchy, LB is obviously the abbreviation for the town that I worked in. And there are some examples in the book of different sayings to capture the importance of reading. One of the things that I would have done differently initially in my reflection is that I had the logo designed for the LB Reads campaign. And one of the things that I eventually did later on, a couple of years later, was I opened it up to students to design a new logo. And maybe someone in another school would want to start that way, or the method that I took where I had the logo created, but then a couple of years later, we rebranded, went away, and invited students to create a new logo. And now with artificial intelligence and platforms like Canva, kids have so many digital tools that they can make such amazing things that look professionally done. So involving the kids is a way to build culture in itself, that if one student is one to build the logo to promote the campaign, that's very exciting. So having a team work on these decisions is very helpful as well. And part of the work of the team is to figure out what that saying is going to be, involve the kids or teachers in choosing a logo. Maybe you have a selection of 5 that were created by students and you vote on one, and then you can have a big launch of your initiative with your logo and your saying. And then to have some materials created to help people immerse themselves in that new brand. So one strategy is to have a currently reading sign where everyone in the school community is invited to put a sign outside of their office or their classroom. For kids, it could be in a digital notebook or a paper notebook, and everybody would make a sign saying what they're currently reading. And you can put that new logo on the bottom. This way, the walls of in your classroom and in your school building are now, every door you're going to see a currently reading sign with that new reading image and slogan. So that's a way to immediately just bring to light what the new culture is.
Yeah. As far as, and then once you're building and then sustaining that culture, are there certain strategies that you have found to be really effective in continuing that, right? Things like maybe you talked about it as an event, right? Events, author visits, things like
Yeah,
that that
sure.
have worked.
Yeah, sure. So author visits are a great addition to any program. They bring reading and the writing process to life. Sometimes author visits can be costly, but there are ways to try to achieve that for a lower cost. Virtual options sometimes bring the cost down because authors don't have to travel to the school and you can reach a wide audience. I also recommend reaching out to community members, parents, neighboring school districts. Sometimes you have people that are newer authors that want to share their work and they're willing to speak to kids after the school district team looks at their work. They're willing to share with students at no cost. So that's a way to bring authors into the school district. You also can choose a time of year where you really want to elevate the importance of reading by declaring a celebratory month. So, for example, in February, our celebratory month was Fall in Love, Book Love. We kind of played on the Valentine's Day theme. And I used that as an opportunity to encourage teachers to talk about reading reflection with students. It's kind of a little midway through the year. What have you read? What have you learned? How have you changed as a reader? And to celebrate what we were currently reading at that point. And it was usually during that month that we would try to host author visits. We also had a book fair at the high school level, which sometimes is a little less frequent than book fairs at the elementary or the middle level. So that was something a little different. You can empower students as literacy leaders and ask them to host school-wide book talks at the high school level. We did that where I had 3 students who facilitated a book talk of teachers and students. They came up with the questions, they advertised the event. It was quite amazing. And then for elementary and middle school, administrators and teachers can work with a group of students in a planning team to host a one book, one school event where people are invited to read a book and then come to talk about it. In the classroom, you can host book tastings where you set up almost like a restaurant theme and you group students typically at tables of 4 and 5, and you put books on the table and you have some sort of recording sheet that looks like a restaurant menu where kids take 3 to 5 minutes and they read the inside cover, they look at the back cover of the book, maybe read a couple of pages, and they do a quick reflection of their first impression of the book. And that's a way to stimulate independent reading or like book club units where kids are sampling different books so that they have an opportunity to make a choice about something that they're interested in. So those are some things that you can do on a school-wide level, within a small group within a school, as a special event, and in the classroom.
Are there certain things that you have in mind that could potentially jeopardize the strength or sustainability of that literacy culture once you've put it into place?
Something that could become challenging is that there are often new initiatives that come into schools or school districts because in education, we want to stay relevant and we want to expose kids to tools that they're going to experience outside of the classroom or in post-secondary experiences. So we have a lot of priorities that we have to attend to. But reading culture it's not a trend. It's something that should remain, and it becomes a very strong and thick thread in the tapestry of what makes up your school or your school district. So we always want to keep our finger on the pulse because of the importance of reading culture, and we need to find new ways to allow the culture to evolve. It's not going to stay the same. We want it to change with our priorities and become how we prioritize other things. So for example, if you want to prioritize topics like technology and innovation, artificial intelligence, the importance of mental health, you can host a book talk with parents and caregivers and invite them to read something that's shared and discuss it, and use reading as a way to invite parents and caregivers to think about these new priorities. You could do a book study with teachers. Whatever the new priority is, choose a book that, again, will ignite conversation around the priorities. And then in terms of student work and books, is that you can work with a team to curate a picture book or chapter book titles that capture the importance of the new priority work and integrate conversations around the new priorities through read aloud. So there are ways that reading can fit into whatever it is that your school district prioritizes and makes as an area for growth. And it's a way, like I said, to have the culture transition and transform as your school district transitions and transforms.
Yeah, totally. And so before we wrap up this conversation, I want to make sure we touch on something else that's important to the goal of fostering literacy and sustaining students' interest and success with literacy. Certainly central to our campaign here is family involvement and how to get families involved, how to onboard them into your campaigns and goals in schools and move forward with that. What are some of your best insights for how to make that happen?
It's important to involve families in developing the culture with you for kids. So some intentional ways to do that are to invite families into school events that are dedicated around the importance of reading, and use it as a time to learn about families, learn about the lifestyles and the priorities and the interests of families. This way, as a school team, you learn about the people in your community, and that information can inform the way that you build your reading culture. So an event that we started in my school district was called Parent Academy. And this was an event that was held a few times a year, and it was dedicated towards supporting parents with supporting their students as readers at home. So teachers would run workshops, administrators would run workshops, and parents sometimes would be able to choose what they'd like to learn about, or sometimes we would structure it for them. There was a special Parent Academy event called Parent Academy Junior Edition, where at the end of August, we would invite families of incoming pre-K and kindergarten students in to learn about ways to build readiness for school and to support early literacy development at home. And we also started to offer Parent Academy events virtually, because we found that in some cases attendance was higher, because if people could attend and not have to worry about childcare or transportation, the virtual option was very helpful. But speaking of the childcare and the transportation, for our in-person events for this specific purpose around Parent Academy and reading culture, we would actually offer transportation to families. We would offer childcare services so that if families were going to bring their children to the event, we would have childcare in the school so that the parents could attend the workshops. We'd also send out information in multiple languages to support the various languages that were in the community, that were spoken in the community. So the Parent Academy events were really supportive of building awareness and partnership with families. One of the things that I share with parents and caregivers is that the adults in the school building don't expect parents to be teachers at home. Sometimes just talking to kids about reading, having some books available, going to the public library, reading books and material that kids take from school, reading with and to children at home, that is so helpful and supportive to the overall mission. And I think it's important to acknowledge that everyone's family life is different, and to provide strategies and tools for families that fit their lifestyle. So if, an older sibling has to babysit a younger sibling, perhaps an activity that they could do together is to read before going to bed or before having lunch, reading in the car on the way to an appointment, or reading if you're waiting for an appointment in an office. So just offering a variety of different ways in which reading can be integrated into different lifestyles, and assuring parents that, again, they don't have to be teachers, just supporters and partners.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say from my view too, and it also depends on age levels and things, but sometimes even pointing out and encouraging the different types of reading
Mhm.
and the different ways we might be reading throughout the day, and not just thinking about it as reading only means a book, or it only means a
Right.
certain thing, and then finding those opportunities to encourage whatever it is that kids might be interested in reading more about. And I know that things like magazines don't so much exist anymore, but in some form or fashion. But
Yeah.
there's all these different ways and that may also appeal to the busy lifestyles of the
Right.
modern reader, right? Which is a lot of times I do think reading, especially reading for pleasure, it feels aspirational because it's always like just out of reach of the day-to-day realities. And
Yeah.
you see yourself, and we're here in the summer recording this. I'm just picturing myself like on the beach with nobody bothering me, reading a book that I want to read, and also
Right.
knowing that it's never going to happen. And if you're somebody like me who likes to be able to start and finish something in a given amount of time, whether it's 10 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour or whatever. I think sometimes that is what lends itself to people maybe feeling, even those who may have the opinion the book's better than the movie, but saying, well, at least I can finish this movie in this
Right.
amount of time and I'll never.
Right.
But can you read an article? Is there an interesting entry in some type of compilation, or whatever the case may be, and just different ways to encourage that and to model it, right?
Yeah.
And to the idea of being reading role models. And sometimes if we understand how important it is, that we have to figure out ways to demonstrate that and showcase it and give other people ideas for how it might work for them, parents, other community members, etc.
Yep.
That we know that it's important, and it can not only make it seem doable, or not exciting, but also accessible. Like
Yeah.
it's
And
something you
being a
actually can achieve. Yeah.
right. Being a digital reader is real. A lot of online content now will put the average duration in which it might take to read, a short article or blog, a 5-minute read, a 2-minute read. Like you said, the word attainable. The author or the publisher wants readers to read the content, but they're aware that things move at a fast pace. People are busy. So they put that timestamp, but that is reading. You don't have to sit and read a novel from front to back. And again, it's an important conversation to have with kids.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, Lorraine, it's been great to have you here on the show. If listeners want to learn more about the work that you do, we'll certainly put the link to the book below and to your website. But is there anything in particular people might want to check out?
So the title of the book we've been talking about is Leading a Culture of Reading: How to Ignite and Sustain a Love of Literacy in Your School Community. We were just talking about shorter text. If you visit my website, there are articles that I've written, blog posts about similar content. So feel free to check that out. And I will have a new book coming out next year called Revolving Literacy. And that is about preparing students for post-secondary experiences and the connection between future ready skills and literacy development.
Excellent. Well, that sounds like it's going to be a good one. So, listeners, let us know if you like this episode, and we can have Lorraine back to talk about the new book, because this education process is really all about that, all about getting young people ready to succeed with the skills of the future, and all the various forms of literacies that we need to have nowadays. So please do check it out. We'll put the links below. You can find Leading a Culture of Reading from Solution Tree. You can get it on Amazon or wherever you get your books. You can also go to Lorraine's website, lorraineradice.com. We'll put the link to that as well, and you can learn a lot more about this, find out where there might be resources and things that can help you, particularly if you also are a school leader or working in a district and you want to try some of these strategies in your setting. It's a great place to start, but there's something I think for everyone who's involved in this. So check all of that out. We'll make it easy by putting the links below. Please also do subscribe to the Authority if you haven't already. We continue to bring you interviews with authors every week. We'll continue to have a lot of literacy focused content during this current campaign, but also a lot of things about teaching and learning and leading and leadership and all kinds of scenarios. So a lot more there to check out, or visit BPod Network to learn about all of our shows. Thanks for being with us today, and thank you, Lorraine.
Thank you, Ross. Have a great day.
This episode was edited by Gage Sanderson.
Do you want to simplify your school's technology, save teachers time, and improve students' performance on state assessments? You can do it all, but don't waste another minute. Head straight to ixl.com/BE to learn how IXL's research-proven teaching and learning platform can help you achieve all of these goals. That's ixl.com/BE.